Hello? Okay, volume is back in iTorah.com. I see it based on my scanner on the upper right. We apologize for that technical difficulty. Do not worry, do not despair. We're going to be sending you the audio file and we'll clone it to the video so you can watch the movie and listen to the sound system and everybody is happy. So for those listening live in iTorah.com, Pirkei Avot chapter 4, Mishnah 24. We're discussing about Shmuel HaKatan, Shmuel Jr. The Gemara writes in Masechet Sanhedrin that he was sitting together with the Hachamim on the yeshiva, and what happens? There was a heavenly voice that says, there is someone among you that the Spirit of Hashem can dwell upon him. Can you imagine? There is suddenly the sound system, you're listening, that Shamayim is talking. But there was no enough merit in the generation to have this person becoming, let's call it a Navi, a prophet. Hachamim started to look around and they all agree that this was Shmuel HaKatan. Shmuel that made himself humble. He escaped from the spotlight. He gave kavod to all of the Hachamim. And they said, when Shmuel HaKatan passed away, they called him Hasid, a pious person. And Hasid in our days has to do with the Hasidic movement from the Baal Shem Tov onwards. But back then, many people were Hasidim. The Gemara tells us, Hasidim Arishonim, the early pious men, used to take 3 hours to pray the morning prayer. They will come an hour before davening, they will pray for an hour, and they will stay another hour. So multiply that times 3, 9 hours a day was tefillah. He was called Anav, very humble, a student of Hillel, the famous Hillel. Shayakatan be'inav. He was a very humble person, and that's why they call him Katan. Why? Because in our history, we have Shmuel HaNavi. But if you're going to call somebody else 2,000 years later, Shmuel HaNavi, so you have to say Shmuel HaNavi 1, Shmuel HaNavi 2, version 2. So what they decided to do, call him Shmuel HaKatan. It goes further. And it says, one of the prophecies that Shmuel gave, this Shmuel from the Talmud, was the prophecy not only of the destruction of the Bet HaMikdash, but he also spoke about a dark chapter in Jewish history by the name of Asara Haruge Malchut, the 10 martyrs that were executed by the Romans approximately 50 years, give or take, after the destruction of the second Bet HaMikdash. And there were many great tzaddikim that were executed by our enemies. Among them, Rabbi Ishmael Kohen Gadol, Rabbi Hananiah ben Teradion, the brother-in-law of Rabbi Meir Baal HaNes, Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel. We're talking about the major leaguers of the tzaddikim of Am Israel, which according to Rabbeinu Hari, he writes, and it says that these 10 tzaddikim were the reincarnation of the 10 brothers of Yosef HaSaddik. And this was the Romans collecting on behalf of Yosef HaSaddik the pain and suffering that Yosef HaSaddik endured during the years of captivity through being sold several times as a slave, and therefore they collected on behalf of Yosef HaSaddik. That's what the Holy Books writes. But today is not about Tisha B'Av, so we'll save it for some other time. So it says, when your enemy is down, don't be happy. What does it mean? Even though that there is a pasuk that says, Uba Abot Reshaim Rina. when the wicked are gone, there is happiness, is not a pasuk that should be taken lightly. Okay? Maybe we need to differentiate when we talk about an enemy of ourselves, of the Jewish people. I cannot talk about the outside world because we have enough what to say about the Jewish people. But Shmuel HaNavi says that, first of all, and that's what the Me'am Lorais explains, do you think that when two Yehudim, two Jewish people, have some type of argument or fight or dispute, Hashem is happy? No. And if we think that Hashem is happy, I think we need to go back to Aleph Bet. I believe all of you are holy and pious ladies who have been learning Torah through years, so we understand that one of the ultimate blessings for the Jewish people is to have what? Peace and harmony. That's what the Mishnah writes at the end of all of the Mishnayot. The Mishnah says, Lo matzah kadosh baruch hu, Hashem did not find a vessel that is able to contain the beracha. Imagine yourself, can you have the pushke there, please? Thank you so much. No, don't worry. Okay, so you have the kuppah, right? You see this opening? This opening is done for what? To put the money in. So imagine yourself, I'm the hacham, and I fill it up with water, and then what do? I turn it. What's going to happen with the water? It's going to have a leak. So that's what happens when there is no peace among the Jewish people. There is a leak in the system. Instead of the beracha staying, the beracha escapes. And that's what this Mishnah says. Lo matzah kadosh baruch hu. The Almighty did not find a vessel, keli mahazik beracha, a vessel that is able to contain the blessing, like this part of the vessel. This is with peace, that whatever I put stays. This is without peace. Whatever I put inside, the peace leaves. Thank you for the live demonstration. So it says, if they are your enemies, God forbid, and then there is a setback in their life, and the person is happy, they are happy that somebody else is suffering, God forbid, which is forbidden. Rabbi Moshe Cordovero writes in one of the chapters of Tomer Devora that it is forbidden to tell someone the reason why they are suffering.
What do you mean?
Literally.
You tell them the reason. What?
He says, I think that the reason why you're going through this, because you did this and this sin.
Oh, okay.
That's wrong. But as a rabbi, I don't do only weddings. I don't do only weddings. I also do bar mitzvahs. But sometimes we have serious conversations. People come and ask, I'm doing this, I'm doing this, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. Why the mazal is not shining on my face? Why I'm dealing with headaches? This is where the rabbis need to activate and tell the person, okay, you gotta do heshbon hanefesh. What's the meaning heshbon hanefesh? You need to do, in English I think it's called soul searching. You need to ask yourself, why I'm going through this? Because you may pray every day. You may, give maaser. You may light the candles on a timely manner. You may eat kasher. And we may do a lot of the things, and I'm using ladies' examples, etc., just to identify them better. But guess what? If in the interpersonal level of relationship, there is no respect among people, or when the person speaks, like we learned today in the earlier class, the person utilizes a language or a vocabulary that is not suitable for a Yehudi to speak about in a proper way, guess what? You can do all of the mitzvot of the Torah, but your mitzvot become contaminated. It's not a secret. That was the men's class today in the morning. And sometimes people ask, I don't understand. I'm doing everything good by the book. Why something is not flourishing? So the Hafetz Haim says this when it comes to Lashon Hara. When a person is not careful how they speak, what happens? The words become contaminated. So if the words become contaminated, it's a two-way street. It's not only the words of Lashon Hara, but it affects the prayer. So in a way, says the Me'am Lo'ez, says, how can a Yehudi has the audacity of being happy when another Yehudi is going through a situation? You know what happened with Sara, the wife of Abraham Avinu? One day, she had an argument with her husband. We have seen it in the Torah, it's not a secret. When it came to the situation with Hagar. And she made a small statement. What did she say? God be the judge between you and I. She made Hashem ishpot beni ubenecha. I'm embarrassed to say what I'm going to say, but I have to say it. She made a mega mistake. Because of this statement, her life was shortened 38 years. Simple. Take my word for it. She summoned God's judgment. The worst thing we can do for our life is calling God to intervene.
To be the judge.
To be the judge. If you're saying it with love, and you say, in Spanish is very common, people say, que Dios te lo pague. So the question is, in English, how do you say this? May God reward you?
Yeah,
That's the literal translation. But the question is, how are you saying it? If you're saying this, que Dios te lo pague con salud y con alegría, it's love, with health, with happiness. But if you're saying it with anger, or you're upset, que Dios te pague lo que tú me haces a mí, that's not a nice way to, correct? That's not a proper way to say. Because you know what we are doing? We're summoning God to be the judge.
Yeah.
And I will tell you two things. When God gets involved in judgment, there is no settlement.
No.
Guilty or innocent.
Period.
Black or white.
No gray.
In this world, we can make a deal. We can settle. In Shamayim, no settlement. But you know what else it happens? Automatically, by activating judgment against someone, we activate judgment against ourselves. And believe me, we already have enough with Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. You want to be judged every week. Actually, there is 3 opinions in the Talmud. How often is the person being judged? It all depends. If you are alive, 3 opinions. If the person leaves the world, 1 opinion. 3 opinions in the Talmud. Once a year, once a week, every hour of the day.
Wow.
That's why when you pray for Parnassah, you don't pray only Parnassah general. If you read the fine print of the prayer of Parnassah, you say, Hashem, send me the livelihood that I need every day and every hour. And that's the reason why sometimes in a business day, you can have an hour that was very bountiful and successful, and then you have 3 hours that is dry. That's what's written in the prayer of Parnassah in the fine print. Many people read the prayer of the man, which is unbelievable, do it. But there is a fine print in many prayer books, and look for this sentence. Every week, every day, and every hour of the day. For the body and for the financial well-being of the person. After the person leaves the world, the judgment, it varies. The first year is daily. After the first year, usually twice a year. The day of the Yortzeit and Yom Kippur. Those are the 2 days that the neshama gets an opportunity, hopefully, for an upgrade. And not the opposite. It's a two-way street. How do you get the upgrade? Very easy. Your family, the surviving relatives, is their responsibility to do so. That's why we do things Le'ilui Nishmat, to elevate a soul. Torah classes, Seudah, Kaddish, Ashkava, learning. Why do we do that? Short answer. Because after the neshama leaves the body, the only language that the neshama understands is the language of the spirit, not of the physical action. During the time that a person is alive, physicality relates. But after the neshama and the guf, the body and the soul, they took a detour from each other, the only language the neshama understands is the spiritual language. Beitachen, and it's possible, it says the Me'am Lo'ez, that because God sees how we are happy of somebody else's misfortune, because I think what the Me'am Lo'ez is trying to say is that when a misfortune happens to a person, it's not like there is no one responsible for this misfortune. That's something that we heard last night in the class, that a person gets a difficult moment in life. Who sends this difficult moment? HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So the same one that sends the challenge sends the salvation, sends the solution. That's why the Gemara talks about, and listen to the recording of Rabbi Eli later, listen when the rabbi makes a mention of a Gemara that talks about the white sheep follows the dark animals. And the Gemara explains that what is the meaning of the dark and the white. It says this refers to the creation of the world. And the creation of the world is a sample of the existence of the Jewish people. Vahi erev, vahi boker. First becomes dark, then becomes light. Okay? First we go into the challenge, and eventually comes the redemption. And that's what's happening today. We are going through a lot of challenges as a nation. I just heard before I came down the class that in New York, they blocked the Manhattan Bridge.
Yes.
You cannot travel in or out. Thousands of protesting, blocking traffic,
Yesterday.
all yesterday or today, I don't know when.
Yesterday.
Okay? And this is the madness that's happening in the world. In Sogra's Mills, the holy Sogra's Mills, that people went there or go there to buy, they were protesting yesterday and Friday. Not on Shabbat, because they know Yehudim don't go on Shabbat to the mall. So they planned it Friday, because it's Black Friday, Chas v'shalom, to miss the Yom Tov of Black Friday, to go to the mall. Okay, which somebody told me, he said, are you suicidal? You go to the mall on Black Friday? You don't go to the mall on Black Friday. It's very dangerous. Excellent question, excellent statement. What do you do on Friday? Get ready for Shabbat. You know, okay, you come back Black Friday online from the previous week already. You don't have to be mahmir and wait till Friday to go to the mall. Especially that occasionally becomes dangerous, irrelevant of the Palestinian protesting and whatever it's happening in our days. For years, they had riots and they had literally very dangerous moments when the people go mamash out of control. So therefore, it says, the Me'am Lo'ez, it says, if you love yourself, don't think about the misfortune of another person as a way that God is punishing them. You want to protect yourself? Pray for them. Goes further and it says, for example, 2 scenarios. One case, it happened last week. The other case happened 2 weeks ago. The third case, it happened 3 weeks ago. 3 cases in a row related to this topic. Let's go to the first one. Last week's Torah portion. After Yaakov leaves the house of Laban, the Torah tells us openly, what does Rachel do? What did Rachel do? She stole the teraphim, the minuscule idols. She did it l'shem shamayim, to prevent her father of continue being involved in idolatry. Avodah Zarah. What happens when Yaakov becomes aware that someone stole these items? Because Lavan went crazy. And Rachel apologizes to him, and he says, Dad, I'm not able to stand up because it's the time of the month. That's what the Pasuk says. And what does Yaakov says? Yaakov says a word that says, whoever stole them, lo ihyeh, should not remain alive. Now, you may say, how can Yaakov say such a thing? So we need to understand, and this is very superficial what I'm going to tell you now, what happened with Yaakov. Yaakov Avinu says, hold on a minute. I thought, Yaakov says, that I was able to survive the house of Laban with all of the toxic environment and all the negativity that Laban promoted, and the Torah says it, but what if, God forbid, one of my descendants picked thievery, has a lesson. Yani they learn from Laban how to steal. If that's the way, I'd rather him leave the world innocent than guilty. Because if you have Laban as an influencer, and you have Esav as another influencer, what's going to be the result? Ben Sorero More, the way the Torah calls it. Below, and the Torah says, Below Yada Yaakov. Yaakov was not aware that Rachel stole these items. So what was the outcome of this unfortunate statement? Rachel passes away as soon as they cross the border into Eretz Israel. She has Heble Leda, she has birth pains, Binyamin is born, and Rachel passes away, and she is buried in Bethlehem, not in Me'arat HaMachpelah. This was incident number 1. Incident number 2. Yaakov and Esav. When Yaakov listens to his mother, I'm going to give you the garments of Esav, and Yaakov says, but Anochi ish halak. What does it mean, halak? Yaakov says, I'm smooth-skinned fellow. My brother is hairy. What does Rivka says? Alai kilaletecha beni. If curses will come out of this trick, I'm willing to accept the curses upon me. That's the meaning of the word. Alai kilaletcha beni. Upon me, she says, let the curses of Ishaq, realizing that you're playing a game, and he's going to start screaming at you and yelling at you and cursing you. You know what? I'm deflecting all of the above to me. Now, why did she say the word alai? Because alai is actually Rashet Abot. Esav, Laban, Yosef. The 3 strikes in the life of Yaakov Avinu. Esav, the headaches with Esav, the shticks with Laban 20 years, and eventually Yosef missing in action. That is one opinion. Second opinion, that Rivka is not talking about then, is talking about Mashiach's arrival. Isaac, Lavan, Ishmael.
That's better.
Ishmael, the last hiccup for the Jewish people, are the current events. It's all written. We just need to know how to find it. Third case, Sedom Ba'amora. The Pasuk tells us that the people of Sedom and Amorah were very cruel. They were not nice at all. I don't have to go to the details, I'm sure you know this, but bottom line, they were hostile and they had a lot of protocols and rules that were not normal. And the Pasuk tells us that once there was an incident, and the Pasuk says, Sa'akata. Shamayim heard the screaming of a young girl. Sa'akata means her screaming. Who was this young girl? Short story, the daughter of Lot. One of the daughters of Lot. Lot had a few daughters. One of them was a very kind young lady. And she committed the ultimate crime. She committed a crime. What was the crime? She gave food to a needy person. In Sedom Ba'amora, that was punishable by execution. This was the cruelty of Sedom Ba'amora. And people, the Midrash tells us, they used to place bets on the life of the poor. You were allowed to give them money, but you were not allowed to sell them food. And people used to place a bet how long this person is going to remain alive without being able to eat and drink. And no one had the audacity of feeding them. Why? Because if you were caught, execution. That's what happened to this daughter of Lot. I'm not going to tell you all the graphic details, but her crying was so powerful and innocent that HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, hold on a minute. Something is going on the earth. What is God's reaction when he hears her crying? You know what the Pasuk says? I'll tell you. Erdana ve'er'eh. I'm coming down to the earth to see what kind of judgment I must activate against this level of cruelty. What do you think? God needs to come down? If I can go back one more week, after the flood, we had another hiccup. The Tower of Babel. What the Pasuk says, I'm going to go down to see. That's it. It goes further and it says, there are two types of enemies. Our personal enemies, which obviously among ourselves, God forbid, I hope that no one has an enemy. Because that's a very, very, very strong language to say. We can relate to saying enemies when we're talking about people who seek our destruction as a nation. That I can relate to an enemy. But to say that a Yehudi has an enemy, it's difficult to absorb or to digest. That perhaps we have people that we don't agree with. What's the big deal? We agree to disagree. What do you think between husband and wife? Don't take it personal. Okay? Between husband and wife, there are no occasional disagreements? Of course, that's how HaKadosh Baruch Hu made us. And our goal in life is to try to work things out together, respectfully, agreeing to disagreeing, and being flexible. That's the bottom line. But the Me'am Lo'ez writes and it says that there is another type of enemy. And this enemy is alive and well, and it's very difficult to get rid of him. Chazak u'baruch. And this refers to the Yetzer Hara. It says this is the enemy of Hashem. This is the enemy of the Jewish people. This is the enemy of the Torah. So therefore it says, often a person has the upper hand against the Yetzer Hara. Let's say the Yetzer Hara comes to us and may say, why do you have to schlep to the Safra synagogue? Stay home. The rabbi is nice enough. He sends the class later, and the rabbi uploads it in iTorah.com, thanks to Jaime and Rico and Maurice and the whole team there up north. They are such a nice people, I don't have to come. That's how the Yetzer Hara works. And occasionally, I don't say that it doesn't help. A lot of the people may be watching now remotely, and Baruch Hashem, they are learning Torah with us, even though we don't know who he is. And could be many men watching, even though it says ladies classes, but we call them ladies classes in your honor. Okay? We can call them multi, how do I say? I don't want to say nothing that misunderstood. Okay, two gender class. Okay, don't say more than that. Today is, even when you think, you gotta think twice. When you speak, rather. But it says that sometimes the Yetzer Hara allows him to be defeated to get us later. Yani to give us a false sense of security in order to come back later with a vengeance. God forbid. Okay? And believe me, we all struggle with this. Even if it means to come to a Torah class or even to come to the minyan. For example, in the case of the men's department or whatever, to do an act of hesed. And a person may be very, very happy and say, I'm Superman, I'm Superwoman. I was able to defeat the Yetzer Hara. I'm so happy. And it says, En ad-davar ken. The only time that a person gets rid of the Yetzer Hara is when the person meets the Creator. That's it. That's it. Between birth and that moment, we need to be on the defensive. Sarich leishamer mipanav. We need to have our, let's call it, defense mechanism of protection. And that's why the Mishnah said, Al ta'amin be'atzmecha ad yom motach. In English means, don't believe in yourself until your day that you are going back to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. What does it mean, this Mishnah? I believe that the Mishnah is trying to say is that throughout history, we have had great people, that they were great most of their life, but in the final chapter of their life, they have a spiritual downfall, including some that were Kohanim Gedolim. Can you relate to that?
Yeah.
We don't really understand what does it mean a Kohen Gadol. But basically, he will be our representative, and he will walk into the Kodesh HaKodashim, the Holy of Holies in Yom Kippur, to pray for all of us, for all of the Jewish people. So he was a great man. And regretfully, we had one that was over 80 years Kohen Gadol, and in the last chapter of his life, he had a hiccup spiritually and fell. You want to know the reason why? I'm afraid of telling it to you, and you're not going to be happy with the answer. According to some opinions, he started to read books that were not suitable for the neshama of the person. Sefarim HaChitzonim. According to some opinions. I'll try to get you better answers next week. Beli neder. But that's what I recall reading a while back.
What
Hitzonim means on the outside. Books that will convey ideals that were not unsuitable according to our Torah. And there another opinion says that they started to praise the Roman Empire. That's what the Gemara brings down. They started to say how nice they were. They built bridges, they built stadiums, they built this, they built that. And one of the rabbis says, whatever they built, it was done for them. It's not for us. When they did the stadium, what do you think they did it for the Daf Yomi? They did it for the Olympic Games. That was the Greeks, Hanukkah. The Romans for the gladiator games. The thousands upon thousands of Jewish people were killed. Don't think that when we say the Olympic Games and the gladiator games, oh, it's something to glorify and to emulate. The background of these celebrations, it has a lot of Jewish blood. God forbid. And it says, the most fundamental strength that comes to the person to defeat the Yetzer Hara one day at a time is the power that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives each and every one of us with one condition, that the person makes the effort. You cannot say, oh, the Yetzer Hara is bothering me. Oh, must have been that God sent them to me to pay me a visit, so let me go spend the day with the Yetzer Hara. That's not what it says. It says the opposite. כשאדם עומד על משמרתו. When the person has the strong mechanism activated, you have the vitamins. אבל אם הוא מתרשל, but if the person becomes lazy, or משים השם יתברך, but he distances themselves from the Almighty, this will be an easy prey for the Yetzer Hara, Haz v'shalom. Now, just for the record, I don't promise that we're going to do this next week, but next Mishnah, if you look at the name, his name was Elisha ben Abuya. You know who Elisha ben Abuya was? The teacher of Rabbi Meir Baal HaNes. But he was the one that later on turned away from God to the point that he was no longer called by the name, he was called Aher, the other one. His name is not mentioned. This is one of the exceptions. Beli Nether, maybe next week we'll talk about Hanukkah. I believe that is appropriate, but I don't promise you that we're going to do the full Mishnah, but I'll try to do research on the reasons why Elisha ben Abuya and Rabbi Yohanan Kohen Gadol and Yerovam ben Nevat. When I say these three names, each one of them was greater than all of the Hachamim of Am Israel put together. Can you imagine that statement? You take all of the Hachamim of Am Israel on one side of the scale, and you put Rabbi Yohanan Kohen Gadol, you put Yerovam ben Nevat, you put Elisha ben Abuya and company, all of them greater than all of the Hachamim of all the generations put together. So there was a virus that turned them away from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Some of them are very easy, the reasoning. Yerovam ben Nevat, he didn't start it to turn away from God from the beginning. From the beginning, he was a holy man, very holy man, an advisor to David and eventually to Shlomo. But he had one enemy. His enemy was himself. He was Baal Ga'ava. He was a very haughty, arrogant person. When Shlomo Melech passed away, and Rehavam, the son of Shlomo, was appointed to be the next king of Israel, which is the proper lineage, the Gemara writes that in the Bet HaMikdash there was a chamber especially for the descendants of David. If you were not a descendant of King David, you cannot sit there. So imagine yourself, Rehavam is sitting on the throne because he's the new king of Israel. Yerovam is standing next to him. Yerovam says, I can eat him alive with Torah knowledge left and right for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. This was the greatness of Yerovam ben Nevat. Yerovam ben Nevat came to the room, the rabbis stopped talking. Abot, Yerovam ben Nevat, Fadal, please, you give the shiur today. This was the greatness of Yerovam ben Nevat. I think upon him it said, all of the Hachamim of the generation were compared like dust and grass next to Yerovam ben Nevat. Yerovam ben Nevat says, I can't stand. He considered Rehavam immature and not qualified spiritually and from Torah knowledge to be the king of Israel. But Yerovam ben Nevat did not have one key requirement that Rehavam had. He was the son of Shlomo, the grandson of David. Yerovam, I believe, he was from Shevet Ephraim. So what did he decide to do? To open up a competition, to open up a new kingdom. In his days, the kingdom of Yehuda and Binyamin were split. 10 tribes, 2 tribes. And he brainwashed the people. Slowly, the spiritual downfall doesn't happen overnight. It happened gradually. Started with being against the king. Then he went to recruit support. Gradually, as the weeks and months are going by, he started to become involved in idolatry. How did he achieve that? By putting roadblocks to go to the Bet HaMikdash. You wanted to go to the Bet HaMikdash, he will tell you for what? No, I want to serve God, I want to do an offering. That's you need? Go to the north, go to the south. Do your offerings. And eventually the offerings, which is a Torah prohibition, to build an altar, especially since we have the Bet HaMikdash. So gradually from one sin leading to the other, and he became involved in idolatry, in Avodah Zara. But God doesn't just execute the person. God sends the person opportunities to do teshuvah. And one of these opportunities was called Eido HaNavi. God sends this prophet. And Eido says to Yerovam, Eido. Eido is not from the 48 famous ones, but is found in the book of Menachem. Was a holy man, holy man. Eido comes to deliver a message from God to Yerovam. And it says, Yerovam, do teshuvah. What Yerovam does? Raises his hand to smack the prophet. What happened? The hand froze. The hands of Yerovam froze. What are you going to do if you are in the shoes of Yerovam ben Nevat? Imagine yourself, let me bring you a simple example. A person on Shabbat wants to touch a cell phone. And suddenly the cell phone tells you, don't touch me. I'm Shomer Negiah. I'm Mukse. Will you touch the phone? No. You're going to run away from the phone. You're going to be afraid. So imagine you lift your hand to smack the Navi, God's messenger, and the hand freezes.
You should get the idea.
Chazak u'baruch. He did not get the idea. He continued in his ways. Who comes to rescue Yerovam ben Nevat next? God. Hashem comes to Yerovam ben Nevat, and it says, Yerovam, do teshuvah. You and I and Ben Ishai will walk together into Gan Eden. I think that's what God says to him. Comes Yerovam and asks God, who is going first? Me, Barosh. Who enters first Gan Eden? I ask you a question. If God is telling you, you and Ben Ishai, or you and I and David are going to go together into Gan Eden, why do you need to ask me, Barosh? Maybe Yerovam like to hear his name being mentioned first by God. God says, you missed the boat. At that moment, the fate of Yerovam and his descendants was sealed. Unfortunately, there were no remnants of Yerovam ben Nevat in the world. All his descendants had an early departure from the world. He was Hote Umahati. He sinned and he caused others to sin. What was the root of his rebellion against God? Ga'ava. He was not happy with the appointment of a bona fide descendant of David and Shlomo. And that's in a way what, even though the original intent of Yerovam ben Nevat was for good reasons. If you look the book of Menachem, in the beginning, there was a question if the decisions that Rehavam, the son of Shlomo HaMelech, was doing for the well-being of the Jewish people were adequate and appropriate. Rehavam didn't agree. And thus the whole balagan began with the unfortunate end of Yerovam ben Nevat. And that's why the Me'am Lo'ez said at the end, it says, every day, you eat every day, you breathe every day, we pray every day, we drink our coffee every day. Why do we need to do it every day? Why don't you do it once a week? Because the body needs nourishment and cleanliness and health, etc. Same thing with the neshama. The neshama needs constant contact. The neshama needs to be charged, like the cell phone. What happened if one day, chas v'shalom, you did not charge your cell phone? Oh,
It is a doornail.
it's a whole problem. You need a backup battery. You need to plug it in. You know, that's what the neshama is. That's the message of today's Pirkei Avot. I wish everybody to have a Shavua Tov. And we'll see you B'ezrat Hashem next Monday for the Spanish-speaking crowd tomorrow by 11. Shavua Tov Mevorach to everyone.